Picture an army that had never lost, that crossed deserts, sailed seas, brought down entire empires in a matter of months. An army that made experienced generals abandon their cities before the first confrontation even began. Now picture the only human being on Earth capable of stopping that army wasn't a king, wasn't a battle-hardened general with decades of experience, wasn't any of the powerful men who controlled the world at that moment. It was a woman. And when she stepped down from her throne onto the battlefield, her own soldiers doubted they would survive the following week. What happened in the days that followed is one of the most brutal, most intelligent, and most forgotten stories in military history. And when you understand what she did, how she thought, and the price she paid for it, you will never look at the word leadership the same way again. This isn't a lecture. This is the true story of a woman who took a collapsing empire, a panicking army, and an enemy considered unbeatable, and turned all of it into one of the greatest tactical comebacks the ancient world ever witnessed. And most people have never heard her name. In the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire was falling apart from the inside. Civil wars, assassinated emperors, borders bleeding in every direction at the same time. In the middle of that collapse, something no one had predicted emerged. A kingdom in the desert. Palmyra. A city-state in the heart of Syria, sitting at the crossroads of the trade routes between East and West. Rich, cosmopolitan, powerful enough to become an ally of Rome without ever becoming subordinate to Rome. And governed, starting in 263 AD, by a woman named Zenobia. She hadn't inherited the throne by accident. Her husband, King Odenathus, had been assassinated along with their oldest son, most likely by a jealous cousin, most likely with the involvement of people inside the palace itself. The surviving son, Vabalathus, was under 10 years old. In any other kingdom of the ancient world, that would have been the end. A widow, a young heir, enemies on every side. The kingdom would be absorbed, divided, erased. Zenobia did not accept that script. She took control as regent, but not as a decorative figure waiting for her son to grow up. She took control as a commander. She spoke Greek, Aramaic, Egyptian, and Latin. She knew the military texts of Alexander, of Julius Caesar, of the Persian generals. She rode on horseback at the front of her troops, wore armor, and personally participated in war councils. Her soldiers didn't respect her because they had to. They respected her because she was, genuinely, the most capable person in the room. And it was at that moment that she made a decision that changed everything. Instead of retreating, instead of asking Rome for protection, instead of negotiating a safe but humiliating agreement, Zenobia decided to expand. In 270 AD, her armies marched toward Egypt. Roman Egypt, the richest province in the empire, the breadbasket that fed millions of people, the territory no external enemy had managed to take in centuries. Within months, Egypt belonged to Palmyra. But what nobody expected was what came next. Because taking Egypt was only the beginning. And what she was building wasn't a kingdom. It was something Rome had never faced coming from that direction. And when Rome finally realized the true size of the threat, it was already too late for a simple response. Zenobia's army didn't stop in Egypt. In 271 AD, her forces pushed north, sweeping through Anatolia, what is modern-day Turkey, territory Rome considered untouchable, the heart of the trade routes connecting east to west. Then she turned west and seized large portions of Asia Minor. In less than 2 years, Zenobia controlled roughly 1/3 of the entire Roman Empire. Not as a savage invader. As a ruler, she minted coins bearing her son's face, declared herself Queen of the East, and began corresponding with kings and merchants as if Rome were just another neighbor, not the dominant power of the Mediterranean world. Rome was too deep in crisis to react immediately. Emperors rose and fell within months of each other. Borders bled in the north with the Goths, in the east with the Persians. Palmyra had grown precisely in the vacuum created by that collapse. But in 272 AD, something changed. A man named Aurelian consolidated control of Rome with brutal speed, stabilized the most urgent borders, and turned his attention east, towards Zenobia. Aurelian was exactly the kind of enemy Zenobia had calculated she wouldn't have to face so soon. A career soldier, born poor, who had climbed every rung of the Roman army through sheer force. No aristocracy, no political connections, just victories. His soldiers called him hand on sword. He wasn't an administrator commanding from a distance. He was a man who slept in the field with his legions and knew every weakness and every strength of his troops with the precision of someone who had built them personally. When his legions crossed into Asia Minor, the cities Zenobia had taken began surrendering one by one. Not because they were cowardly, but because facing Aurelian in open field was a completely different proposition from facing the previous Roman governors, exhausted and undersupplied, that Zenobia had swept aside with relative ease. Zenobia pulled back strategically to Emesa, in Syria. There, with her army assembled and the terrain carefully chosen, she prepared what would become the decisive confrontation. And this is where her tactical genius showed itself in a way military historians still study today. The Palmyrene army was built around a unit that had no equivalent in the Roman world: the Clibanarii. Heavy cavalry armored in a way that seemed impossible for the era. Riders covered head to toe in overlapping metal scale armor. Horses also partially armored. Each unit was a fortress in motion, capable of a frontal charge that crushed infantry like paper. No army in the region had found an answer to them. Zenobia built her entire formation around that force. The idea was simple and brutal. The Clibanarii would drive through the center. Infantry would hold the flanks. Light cavalry would protect the edges. A war machine designed for a single purpose: to break any line placed in front of it. Aurelian looked at the formation and understood the problem immediately. But what Zenobia didn't know was that Aurelian had spent the previous weeks studying the Clibanarii specifically. He knew what everyone knew, that they were devastating in a direct charge. But he also knew what few had survived to report: armor that heavy comes with a cost. The riders inside it exhausted themselves within minutes of intense combat. The accumulated heat was suffocating. Horses carrying that weight tired rapidly. A Clibanarii charge was a single-impact weapon. If it didn't break the line on the first pass, it became a target. Aurelian ordered something that shocked his own officers. When the Clibanarii charged, the Roman cavalry was to fall back. Not flee in panic. Fall back in a controlled retreat, drawing the Palmyrenes away from their infantry, letting the charge burn itself out in empty space, letting the riders inside those armors roast in the October heat. And then, when the Clibanarii were exhausted, motionless, practically unable to lift their arms inside the scalding metal, the Roman cavalry would turn and attack. The plan worked with a precision that Roman chronicles describe with barely concealed admiration. The Clibanarii charged. The Roman cavalry gave ground. The Palmyrenes pushed forward, and realized too late that they had separated from their infantry, that they were alone in the field, that the heat inside the armor was turning every movement into agony. When the Roman cavalry turned around, the Clibanarii could barely raise their lances. Zenobia's line didn't break all at once. It broke in pieces, unit by unit, while she tried to reorganize a battle that had slipped out of her control the moment the enemy refused to fight the way she had expected. But what happened after the battle was where the story became truly impossible to believe. Zenobia didn't flee immediately after Emesa. She pulled back to Palmyra, her city, the walls that had been built over centuries in the heart of the Syrian desert. And there, surrounded by Aurelian and his legions, she made a decision that revealed exactly who she was on the inside. She didn't ask for peace. She didn't negotiate a surrender. She sent a letter to Aurelian that historians of the era preserved almost in its entirety, and the tone of that letter is cold enough to make your skin crawl even today. She wrote that queens do not surrender to generals. That if Aurelian wanted Palmyra, he could come and take it stone by stone. Aurelian responded with a siege. But the desert was Zenobia's territory, and she knew how to use it. Roman supply lines stretched hundreds of miles across hostile terrain. The heat, the sand, the guerrilla attacks on resupply routes, all of it bled Aurelian's legions day after day. The siege lasted weeks. And during those weeks, Zenobia sent messengers east, toward the Sassanid Persian Empire, the only power in the world capable of rivaling Rome, asking for alliance, asking for armies, asking for the time she needed to turn a siege into a trap. The Persians didn't arrive in time. When it became clear that Palmyra's walls wouldn't hold much longer, Zenobia mounted her fastest horse and attempted to flee east, toward the Euphrates, where Persian ships could carry her beyond Roman reach. Aurelian's cavalry caught her at the river's edge. The queen who had conquered a third of the Roman Empire, who had kept emperors awake at night, was stopped at the bank of a desert river, alone, without an army, without a kingdom, without the armor of power she had built over a decade. What Aurelian did next was the part nobody saw coming. He didn't execute her. In Rome, the tradition for defeated enemies of her magnitude was clear: public trial and death. But Aurelian brought Zenobia to Rome alive, bound in chains of gold, not iron, and displayed her in the greatest military triumph the city had witnessed in generations. The golden chains were not mercy. They were a message. This enemy was too valuable to be wasted on a quick execution. Roman sources describe the scene with a detail that reveals the discomfort of everyone present. Zenobia walked through the streets of Rome with her head held high. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't show any of the signs of defeat the Roman crowd expected from a captured enemy. She walked as if she were inspecting the city, not being displayed in it. Soldiers who had participated in the siege of Palmyra reported years later that that walk had been more unsettling than any battle they had ever faced. Aurelian installed her in a villa in Tivoli, on the outskirts of Rome, with servants, with a library, with the material resources of a woman of standing. Some historians interpret this as refined cruelty, keeping her alive to permanently remind her of everything she had lost. Others interpret it as genuine respect from a general who had recognized, on the battlefield, that he had faced something out of the ordinary. What happened to Zenobia after Tivoli is the point where history fragments and becomes even more fascinating. Some sources say she died shortly after, from illness or grief. Others say she married a Roman senator, that she lived for decades in Tivoli surrounded by philosophers and scholars, that her descendants became part of the Roman aristocracy. There are even late records suggesting that one of her daughters married into the imperial family. The woman who had sworn that queens do not surrender to generals may have spent the rest of her life as one of the most intellectually influential women in Rome, exactly the kind of twist no screenwriter would dare to invent. But Zenobia's legacy wasn't in Tivoli. It was in the desert. Palmyra, after the surrender, was treated with relative clemency by Aurelian. He didn't destroy the city immediately. But when a minor rebellion broke out in the following months, supported by residents who still carried loyalty to the captured queen, Aurelian returned and this time showed no mercy. The walls were torn down. The treasures were taken. The city that had been the crossroads of the ancient world was reduced to a fraction of what it had been. Palmyra never fully recovered. The ruins that exist today in Syria, those golden columns rising from the middle of the desert that appear in breathtaking photographs, are the skeleton of what Zenobia once ruled. And there is something both poetic and brutal about those ruins at the same time. A city destroyed because a woman refused to bend the knee. A city that exists today only as a ghost precisely because of the greatness of the person who governed it. The question historians debate to this day is the same as always. What would have happened if the Persians had arrived in time? If Zenobia had managed to cross the Euphrates? A Roman Empire already weakened, facing the Goths in the north, the Persians in the east, and a desert kingdom controlling a third of its territory all at once, might have simply split in two. The history of the Mediterranean world would have been different. The languages we speak today might be different. The borders that exist today would be different. All of it depended on a Roman cavalry unit catching a woman alone at the edge of a river before she crossed to the other side. By a matter of hours, the world we know was preserved. Or destroyed, depending on which side you're standing on. Zenobia's name disappeared from the history books for reasons that have nothing to do with the size of what she accomplished. They have everything to do with who wrote those books. The Roman chronicles that survived through time were written by men for male audiences, within a culture that had a very clear system for categorizing women in power. They were queen consorts, mothers of kings, widows keeping the throne warm until the sun grew up. A woman who commanded armies, who studied military tactics, who expanded an empire on her own initiative, who wrote letters to Roman emperors telling them she would not surrender. That woman didn't fit into any available category. So what the chroniclers did was what is always done with what doesn't fit. They minimized it. They emphasized her beauty, mentioned her vanity, suggested there were men behind the decisions. The Historia Augusta, one of the main Roman sources on the period, describes Zenobia with a list of physical attributes before mentioning anything she actually did. As if her appearance were the most relevant piece of information about a woman who had taken Egypt. That erasure wasn't total. It couldn't be. What she did was too large to fit completely under the rug. But it was enough that today, when you ask anyone about the great military leaders of the ancient world, her name doesn't appear on the immediate list. Alexander appears. Julius Caesar appears. Hannibal appears. Zenobia doesn't appear. And that says far less about her than it does about us. Because what she built, with the resources she had, in the time she had, against the enemies she faced, is comparable to any military campaign of antiquity. She took Egypt when nobody expected it. She expanded across all of Anatolia when Rome was too busy to react. She created a professional army with an armored cavalry unit that had no equivalent in the Western world. And when she was finally defeated, she was defeated by one of the most talented generals Rome ever produced, using a specific tactic developed to counter exactly the force she had built. You don't defeat a mediocre enemy with a brand new tactic. You defeat an exceptional one. There is a detail in the Battle of Emesa that academic books mention in footnotes, but that deserves to be at the center of the story. When the Roman cavalry began its controlled retreat, drawing the Clibanarii away from the Palmyrene infantry, there was a moment when Zenobia's line could have held. Her generals saw the Roman pullback and understood it might be a trap. Records indicate that at least one senior commander tried to hold back the Clibanarii, tried to prevent the charge from extending beyond the point of control. But the logic of battle has a physics of its own. A heavy cavalry charge in motion doesn't stop easily. The riders at the front couldn't hear the orders coming from behind. The momentum was too great. And it was precisely that momentum, the greatest strength of Zenobia's army, that became its destruction. The weapon that had conquered entire territories consumed itself on an autumn afternoon in Syria because no one had ever before found an enemy smart enough to simply get out of its way. That is a tactical lesson that modern military manuals still reference. Unmodified strength becomes weakness the moment the enemy stops resisting it. A muscle pushing against a wall that disappears doesn't find balance. It finds the void and falls straight into it. Zenobia understood that lesson after Emesa. Too late for the battle, but not too late for history. In the decades she spent in Tivoli, whether as a refined prisoner or as the intellectual matriarch of the Roman aristocracy, she wrote. She studied. She received philosophers, debated theology, corresponded with thinkers from across the Mediterranean. The same mind that had planned the conquest of Egypt now mapped ideas with the same precision it had once used to map military campaigns. There is something in that image that is hard to shake. A woman who built and lost an empire, sitting in an Italian villa surrounded by books, talking with philosophers, probably more intellectually free than she had been during all the years of power. Perhaps understanding, with the clarity that only defeat provides, that the empire she had built with armies was less lasting than the one she was building with words. Palmyra exists today as a ruin. Rome exists today as a different kind of ruin, a museum of itself, a city built on layers upon layers of what was once the center of the world. And Zenobia exists today as a name that appears in academic articles, in occasional historical novels, on the street signs of Arab countries that claim her as a national symbol. But the battle she fought, the audacity she demonstrated, the scale of what she built starting from a desert city with a young son and enemies in every direction, that deserves far more than footnotes. Because the truth is that the story you just heard is not about a queen. It is about what happens when someone refuses the script the world wrote for her. It is about what is possible to build when you decide that other people's defeat does not have to be your own. It is about a woman who looked at a collapsing empire and saw not the end, but an opening. And about the fact that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is not the one who shouts the loudest, not the one with the most soldiers, not the one carrying the most impressive title. It is the one who understands the terrain better than anyone else, who trains for the war before it begins, and who, when everything falls apart, can still walk through the streets of Rome with her head held high and golden chains on her wrists without letting anyone see where it hurts. If this story taught you something, go ahead and subscribe and like the video, because the next story is even more incredible than this one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.